gigantic drummer patch that I made works. So there's there's a bunch of different sections to it. You load in the patch, obviously there's going to be some routing needed. You have to take your outputs from this multiplexer, your gate and your note out into a Combinator track that has your instrument in it, and you want to have a one of the players on it, but you want to make sure that it's actually turned off, and that's going to let you send the MIDI data that comes from the whole thing into a track when you're ready to lay something down. I'm going into a Kong here just for simplicity's sake, so it's ready to go for anybody who wants to use this as soon as they download the Combinator. There are going to be a number of paid rack extensions in this. First one is the Trigger Multiplexer from Robotic Bean. Then really important is the pattern programmer, which is Propulsion by I think it's Electric Panda. Yeah, Electric Panda. And then Randrome is from the Chronologists, is also used, so that's a paid one as well. The rest, there are a couple of free rack extensions that you'll need to have as well. The rack divider, or whatever, I can't remember what it's called, but I use that to kind of keep track of all the stuff that's going on, because this is obviously a pretty huge Combinator. And then I believe the CV suite is free as well. I know Pulsar, I got it free. I know a lot of people have it, so that you may have to pay for that as well, but I think most people have that free. And then Loth, I think, is the last one. Oh wait, no, there's this, I don't even know what the heck this thing is called. DLD CV2 meter. So those are the rack extensions that are going to be needed. I guess I'll start at the bottom here in terms of what you're actually looking at. So basically I have everything kind of laid out. So this is all the logic that goes into it. These are all, actually there's another one, truth. This is important as well. So basically the kit piece logic section is looking at whether or not a particular hit is considered required or not. So if you have like a kick pattern, you can have it so certain notes are randomly going to hit, or based on a probability, and then other hits are going to be required, and that's basically taken care of within this. And I'll go into more on how that actually works in a minute. So that's the kit piece section, or the logic section. There's this kick, push, pull, master velocity section here. This is just to help you set how far ahead or behind the rest of the kit pieces the kick, which actually I only have it set up for channel 1 on the Propulsion, so if you have kicks on other channels, it's not going to work for those unless you do some additional routing. Then kit piece routing, so this is just basic kind of getting CV stuff to go where it needs to go. Then we have randomness splits. So this is just a Pulsar, which is controlling, and a Thor, which are controlling some of the randomness levels that you get, just with some random LFOs. And I've got delays to kind of make sure that not everything is getting the exact same randomness value at the same time. So most of that stuff you don't have to worry about in terms of actually using it, just good to know that it's there. And then this probability section, so this is going to list all of your different kit pieces. So I have 16 set up, one for each pad on the Kong, and then each one has its own Randrome. And so if we look at number one, I have one is the kick for me, so usually, so I have the basically the only thing you're going to want to touch in these Randromes is the probability. And so that when you're trying to get a hit that's got a potential to trigger but isn't required to trigger, this is where you'll set the probability for it. So you can set between 0 and 100%. So right now I have all these turned completely down, so everything is being triggered by the portion that overrides the probabilities, basically. And then we have the actual program section, which is where we're going to input our patterns. So basically we have two of these propulsions, and each is doing something similar but separate. So the first one up here is the required strikes, so the one on top is your required hits. So and we'll get into more about how to use that in a minute or two. And then the one below is the actual programming to tell the sequence to which pieces to hit at any given point in the sequence. So, and this is going to be used to control your probability hits as well. And again, I'll go into more on that in a minute, and it'll hopefully make a little more sense. And then just the multiplexer, which is I put it up here at the top in case you want to replace your external triggered combinator. You can just do it from the top here. So and again, I just have the CV outputs from this going into the combinator track. So that said, I guess we can kind of get into how to actually use it. So I set up a really simple beat in here to start off, and I have, so this top one is required hits, and then this bottom one is the actual pattern, the gate out that is going to tell whether there's even a chance of a particular hit occurring within the sequence. So right now I just have a real basic kick and snare pattern here. So here, really simple. So basically what's happening is this is telling this lower propulsion is telling the combinator that there's a chance that these hits will need to be played, and then this one up here is saying definitely play these hits. So you can see that there's some duplication of information, but this allows you to also it lets you set certain notes to be always required, and then certain notes can be triggered based on probability. And so I guess I'll kind of go through like a normal case use case for this would be, so I would program in, say I want this as my basic beat, my kick snare pattern here, and let's say I want to also have a couple of hi-hat hits that are always going to hit. So let's say we're going to go with, I know my 3 is, and I have these all numbered according, so 3 down here corresponds to 3 down here. So so I want to do my hi-hat hits on the these beats here. So right now, if I play this, you're still only going to hear the kick and the snare. Even though these are required hits, this lower propulsion is the one that's driving whether or not, you know, this is the ultimate decider of whether or not there's going to be a hit. So so if I want to make these, actually what I'll do, the way I would normally do this is I would set up my basic beat up here, then I would do a copy patch, and then I would just paste it down here. So basically what you're doing is copying all the stuff that you know you want to hit 100% of the time, and you're pasting it down here into the lower propulsion, and then you're going to do further editing within this lower propulsion to kind of add some differences in the playback. So right now that I have these 4 notes in both sections, it should play all the hi-hat hits. And so right now we're just doing some basic sequencing. There's not really anything too interesting going on. So the first thing I'll show now is kind of how, if I want to make this a little more interesting, I can come down here. So I told you that I had the all of the probabilities turned all the way down. So if I go into my hi-hat and just make everything across the board, you're still only going to hear, you know, the same hits that we were hearing before, because it's only getting you're required on these ones, and it's completely bypassing the probability section. So if we start to bring this probability up now, we're going to actually start hearing some of these hits come in and drop out randomly. So you can, you know, kind of drop out if you know you don't want certain notes to land on in certain spots. You can drop those out as well and get a little more fine-tuned with your control on that. Now, one thing to note is that the 100%, this upper section, I got it to work as closely as I can to 100% of the time, but I have noticed that there are occasional dropouts. So, you know, take that for what it's worth. It's rare, but it does happen. So just keep that in mind. And also, if you're adding more, the more randomness that you add, the sloppier it's going to be. Or I'm sorry, the more randomness you add, the more likely that there's going to be a hit that's dropped. Okay, so that's basically the pattern programming. So if I wanted to come in here and add some toms, let's say toms are 9, 10, 11 on this. So I'm actually going to bring this out. So this is another kind of neat thing you can do with a setup, because you're running 2 propulsions. You can kind of do some weird stuff with you know, running different length patterns in each one, and then, you know, seeing what happens. So but for right now, I'm just going to kind of create a pattern that has a tom fill at the end. So it's going to play through the main beat twice, and then every second time it's going to play this tom fill here. So just going to randomly throw some notes in here, and that's not going to play back right now because I don't have anything. Let's make some of these required. This one, and we'll do that one. Okay. but now I can come down to my 9, 10, and 11 in here in the probability section and bring these up a little bit. I don't think I want quite that high. Somewhere around 25-30%. Okay, and then when I play back, it should randomly so you can kind of get some you know, fine-tune your fills and stuff that way. But and if you're feeling really crazy, you can always just kind of like take one of these patterns and then just add a couple notes to it, and then let's turn the oh, I already have that up there. Okay, so now I've added a little bit of, I got 2 extra notes in the rotation, so that's going to throw off these, and you're going to get some interesting kind of polyrhythmic things going on. But again, randomized according to the probabilities that you set and where all that falls in terms of the required notes in that. So it's pretty flexible. Okay, and then so now that we have kind of a basic idea here of our pattern, we can send that to the sequencer using this send to track function. So again, we want to have your player off, whatever it is. It doesn't matter if it's a note echo or any of the other two, the arpeggiator. You just want to make sure that's off and that the bypass is also off. And then we're going to hit, and you also want to make sure that your program is actually running. So we're going to hit send to track. Thing. Okay. It did its thing. And so now we have the track here. And if we go in, you'll see that in this case, stuff is pretty well quantized. It's not completely quantized. You can see there are a couple notes that are very slightly late. And that's another thing that I was unable to completely get rid of all of the I was unable to get everything completely completely quantized when you export, even when I turn the slider for that all the way down. I'll show you the sliders in a minute, but basically you'll see all these have right now, they have velocities that are within one of each other. So even the velocity I couldn't get to be completely dead on every single time, but it's really close. And if you really need to quantize something, which sort of defeats the point of this whole combinator, you can just use your F8 and quantize it that way. But so when you do that, you've created your track here. You can then, if you want to hear what you played, you actually have to disable the playback of the propulsions. And so there's a handy button here, says run. And this is my favorite feature of the entire thing, is the run button tells you, it changes the color of the program label to red to show you that it's not running. So right now if I play, it should play back what is in the sequencer. So okay, so let's get rid of that for now and delete that, and then go back to our, okay, so that will automatically put your note echo or whatever player you have back into bypass mode. So if every time you're going to want to send it to a track, you're going to have to make sure to take that back off, and then you're going to have to also re-enable your run button if you have if you've disabled it. So so that's basically the programming, the pattern programming part of it. There's a couple of other things that I built into this, which are the velocity randomness and the timing randomness. So we'll start with the velocity, I guess. I'll just basically, we have three controls in the Combinator. One's for tightness and sloppiness, steadiness and dynamic, and push and pull. And I'll show you what push and pull does in a minute, but we'll start with the steady and dynamic knob for right now. So right now I have this pulled all the way to the left. That means that there's almost no randomness going to the velocities on these. So I'm going to crank this all the way to the right, and let's play that back. And you can kind of hear that it's giving you different velocities on all of the different drum strokes. And you can tweak these, all three of these, well actually yes, all three of these you can tweak on the back of both of these propulsions. The only thing that you want to do is make sure that if you're changing one of these, so especially the offsets, if you're changing the offset modulation amount, then you want to make sure it matches the corresponding control in both of the propulsions. Otherwise, you're probably going to have some issues with some of the functions. But right now, I just have them set to 40, so all this stuff should sound pretty. It shouldn't sound too crazy, even when I crank the knobs. But you can tailor that to your needs. So tightness and sloppiness would be the offsets. Your velocity is only going into the one propulsion, the one that's actually sending the gate that's being used for playback. So you can adjust those here, and the push-pull knob. So this is specifically for the kick timing. So I think you have to do that with the offsets on the first channel. I actually have to look at that because it's been a while since I put that in there, and there's so much going on with this, I forgot how that works exactly already. So but yeah, you can change all that, all the scaling if you need to. So right now we have the velocity turned all the way up. If I come back up into my send a track, should have that in there. So now you'll see in the note or in the track that was recorded, you've got a lot of different values in here now. So, and again, we still have the timing turned all the way down, so most of the timing is pretty on the beat. Okay, and then we'll come back in here and we'll show you the tightness and sloppiness slider. So again, it's not super, it's not going to go too crazy if I crank this all the way, but you can kind of hear it. You can hear a little bit that it just sounds like there's sort of a crappy drummer playing. So I usually like to keep these about in the middle. I think if you turn them up just a touch, you get a good result. Really, pretty much anywhere in the range, it sounds pretty good, at least to my ears. Except if it's all the way to tight, and it sounds a little robotic to me. But that's basically the basic kind of functionality. Then there's the last thing to cover really is this push-pull knob. So again, this basically just moves the kick hits relative to all of the other kit pieces. So I pulled the tightness all the way down, so everything should be more or less on the beat right now. But if I move the push-pull backwards, so it's towards push, you're actually pushing the kick ahead of the other instrument or the other kit pieces. You can kind of hear it. If you push it to the back, it's behind all it. And again, you can come up and make sure if you're going to send it to your track, you're going to bypass. Okay, and then you see the kick happens after the beat. So now, one thing to keep in mind with that is that if you have a high slop setting on this, you can still have you know, your kick may not be before or after always. So depending on how sloppy you have it, you're not necessarily going to have your kick ahead of the beat or behind the beat every time. It's just going to be kind of an on average sort of thing in that case. And I think that's pretty much it. So yeah, just create your basic pattern up in this top propulsion, copy that to your lower propulsion, and then start adding different random notes in here into your lower one, and then set your the probability that you want each of those to hit down here in the Randrome section, or the probability section, and then, you know, set your how tight or sloppy you want your playback to be, the amount of dynamics or steadiness to it, and then whether you want the kick to be ahead of or behind the actual other kit pieces, just to kind of give more tension or whatever. But that's pretty much it. I'm gonna post this Combinator to the Reason Talk forum, and if anyone's interested and has any questions, just let me know. But that should do it. Thanks.